Hello and welcome to our video contemplation of day signature 51. This frequency corresponds to the Seven of Wands and the wand virtue of desire. It is represented by the angels of conviction and awakening.
So we have the 29th angel of devotion.
Oh, yeah, I said conviction by accident. I'm still excited about conviction. 29th angel of devotion. Yes. Thank you.
You're welcome. Who walks the pathway of commitment to become the embodiment of blessing. And then we have the 51st angel of awakening, who walks the pathway of the avatar to become the embodiment of activation. This is a really exciting one.
Every day we say this.
That's
and every
true.
day we mean it.
Yes.
But definitely and extra today.
Yeah.
We should mention as well that the prime instinct we meet here in the Seven of Wands is the prime instinct to return. So we've got all of our words in place.
Yep.
We've got a lot of ground to cover today. A lot of really exciting stories and ideas to share with you. We'll begin, perhaps as we always do, simply by sharing the keynotes that we have for the seven, so that our listeners have that information in their back pockets. Do you remember offhand what they are? The two keynotes?
Yes. So for the seven, we have wisdom and innocence.
Yeah, wisdom and innocence. As a secondary keynote, I believe we only have one right now, and it's the word messenger. There's something about the quality of the seven as it moves through these different placements that feels to us like it's communicating something. It's an angel or a messenger in this way.
Oh, I think it fits perfectly.
It does.
Because this wand virtue of desire is a messenger. It is our most important messenger.
Ooh,
and there is inherent wisdom in our desires. They are something that we've been kind of taught to dismiss or to minimize or to suppress, when really they are the thing that is guiding us to become all that we can be.
They're able to do this because they're connected to an original core of our highest possible expression, or another way of thinking of that would be an innocent core of who we are. An innocent, pure, and original largeness inherent to every one of us. This is very much what this day signature is celebrating, pointing at, poking at even, awakening. I love the word awakening. I'm jumping ahead here for just a moment. Because in the Crystal Self experience, whether you're working with the Chronicle or the Odyssey experience itself, the very first position that we meet is this first chapter of the experience is actually called the awakening. That's the beginning of everything. The significance of this moment of awakening cannot be overstated. You have this sleeping giant and then it wakes up. The rest of the story unfolds as a result.
I know from personal experience that, again, sometimes we can completely overlook that moment as being significant. But after having had so much of life that I've lived, looking back on that moment, it was everything. That moment of awakening is unmistakable, especially when you start allowing yourself to understand and become familiar with your desires, what they really mean and where they've been leading you all along.
Absolutely. Each of us lives out a different version of this.
Absolutely.
Some of us arrive awake, so to speak, right out the gate. We're just looking for something on purpose and we know it and we're conscious of it and it drives us. I feel as though this is perhaps more representative of my story. Others of us are just cruising through life, doing everything they know to do, everything they've been told to do, and then you kind of hit this wall of awakening, after which point everything is changed. And that's a little bit more like what you've just described. It's not like you are unaware leading up to that point. It's that complete awareness descends kind of all at once, and then you spend the next several years or decades unraveling what was dropped on you. And it's like, oh my word, this is huge. This is huge.
Mm-hmm.
Your life begins anew at that point. So this moment of awakening, whether it's happening, in micro moments for someone who is very consciously seeking, you're constantly awakening to the memory of those things you're searching for, or whether it's this mind-blowing revelation that completely alters the course of what you thought your life was going to be. In either case, awakening changes things. There's a reason that this 51st angel is often referred to in human design as the gate of shock.
Mm-hmm.
There's something about this. It's also connected to thunder, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it shakes things up.
Yeah, that's what the 51st hexagram is called in the I Ching.
Yeah, that's right.
It's called thunder.
Thunder, is it thunder over thunder?
Mm-hmm.
It's all thunder?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so that's a part of what we're dealing with today. There's big energy here. Speaking of big energy, we can't help but rewind to this wand virtue of desire.
Mm-hmm.
We've been talking about desire daily now for a while.
Yes.
You may have noticed. Well, here we arrive at the wand virtue of desire. Of course, it's a wand virtue. Of course, it's fiery and passionate and vigorous and filled with life.
Mm-hmm.
Because, as we've been taught by the angels, desire is the primordial force of all that is. It is the original fuel, the original motivator.
Yeah, it's what fuels life to move.
Correct.
We wouldn't have movement without desire.
Yes, we were working just this morning with the 9th angel session with the angel of promise who walks the pathway of desire. So we were very much in this energy kind of separately from the day signature itself. And we were reading about this, revisiting these lessons on the subject of desire. Lessons like life itself is the expression of desire. Mm-hmm. Life is the expression of desire. Mm-hmm. If desire is not permitted to express, there is no life allowed to move in that direction. Life itself does not move except by virtue of desire, by on the force or the wave of desire. It's fueled by that. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, it simply wouldn't move. Why would it bother? We are taught that purpose is embodied through permission of desire. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of powerful connectors here. Mm-hmm. Purpose is embodied through permission of desire. That first position we meet in the crystal self, the awakening, it's life purpose.
Mm-hmm. Wow, yeah.
So what are we awakening to? We're awakening to that underlying purpose. And what is that underlying purpose inherently connected to in every case, regardless of who you are? It's connected to your unique expression of your own specific desires. There's this web of connections supporting every life, and somehow that same web is expressing itself uniquely through each life. Mm-hmm. That's what desire does. It adapts itself to the medium through which it moves. And so desire moves differently through me than it does through Laura, than it does through you. And that's a part of what makes each of us special. Mm-hmm. It has to move. Yeah. And it's meant to move us.
Yes. Yeah, I also noticed that this 30th angel, if you're familiar with the Gene Keys, you might be familiar with the concept of programming partners. Mm-hmm. And actually, one of our angels today, the 29th angel of devotion, is the programming partner for this 30th angel of promise. So great. They're intimately interwoven concepts. I think that right away I can see how when we connect to our desire and know that's what is moving us, mm-hmm. that's what we become devoted to.
Yeah, absolutely. If it's permitted. You cannot help but. Mm-hmm. Because it's what you love.
Right.
Because it's already holding your whole heart. Yeah. And so the only ingredient left is to permit that.
Right.
Is to allow it.
And that pathway of commitment transforms from something that feels like, a ball and chain, yeah. or what we think of as commitment, some great effort. Yeah. It becomes effortless. It becomes inevitable. All that you would want to do with that energy.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, it's a true commitment.
It's a commitment of your whole self. Mm-hmm. It's not an effort. Right. I think that is so important. I hadn't even thought to say that, but it's because you and I live in our definitions of these words so completely now that sometimes I forget the old way of thinking about commitment.
Right.
Oh, I'm afraid of commitment. No, what you're aware of is that you're not intended to commit yourself half-heartedly to something that has nothing to do with you. Somewhere deep down inside, you know that you are meant to commit totally in one direction, and in a direction that is aligned with your desires, with your story, with your blossoming reality. That's what we're called to. I've never thought of it in this way, but interestingly enough, that fear of commitment may very well be an appropriate response
absolutely.
To like a usually external demand to settle in one direction or another.
Yeah. So if it feels like a burden, if it feels just not right, not quite right, that is an absolute indicator.
It's a sign.
That, commitment is a beautiful concept that we're meant to embrace. So when you commit yourself to your true desires, it will feel like something you are so happy to do.
Can't help but. There's nothing else you'd rather do. Yeah. Wow. First of all, great refinement, babe, from if to when. Very subtle, but significant because it's only a matter of time. We were told by the angel of truth, I believe, that desire is the siren song of home. Is that correct?
Yes.
Desire is the siren song of home. It's calling us back to something. It's awakening a memory.
Absolutely. It is a memory.
A memory, as this angel said, the angel of promise said, it's a memory of larger life in you.
Yeah. So you are, in fact, actually, when you have these desires, you're remembering a part of yourself that is actually alive, and it is waiting to be reunited, with you, awakened in you, and brought to life through you.
Oh, and there it is. Yeah. There's the other pathway of the avatar.
Yes.
And we may as well dive right into it.
Absolutely.
Right. In order to do that, we're going to need to qualify where we're coming from, because this idea of the avatar, it's home base, I think, at least for us. We're most excited about what we're seeing here since it connects out to everything else. But in order to really get a sense for where we're coming from with it, I think it's worthwhile to share a little bit of the different avenues that we're going to be moving through in order to get at those pieces.
Yeah.
So the word avatar at this point is used in many different ways. We're really going to be working with it in this conversation, I think, through three primary avenues. Metaphorical avenues. Okay, we're going to use story to connect to this. Now, my hope is that some of our listeners will be familiar with at least some of these different stories. But we'll leave that up to you to do your own research if you are new to what we're introducing. So one example of an avatar would come from a Nickelodeon show, of all things, like a child's cartoon called Avatar: The Last Airbender. And I am a far larger nerd for this goofy series than I care to admit. But it's because it so brilliantly portrays this idea of an avatar. So that's one example. I won't go into the why yet, just know that there's this one avenue. Another is the movie Avatar itself. Separate from Avatar: The Last Airbender, more of you may be familiar with the movie Avatar. I mean, it's a very, very famous movie at this point. You've got the famously blue people or beings from the planet in that particular movie. We love that movie. And we're going to refer to this as well. And another example of an avatar would be, it would kind of grow out of a spiritual context where you have the idea of like an ascended master.
Or a deity.
Yeah, descending into form in some way. And so an obvious example would be Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ was an avatar, right? So these are three different ways of thinking about the word avatar, but perhaps the most exciting way is simply by defining it. We literally just looked up the word avatar and read the definition. You
Yeah.
wrote it down, right?
Yes.
Would you read it?
So an avatar is a physical embodiment of an idea or concept, a personification. So, I mean,
Too
to
good.
me, yeah, it's like when I think of Jesus, I think of the fact that he is literally the personification of Christ consciousness, like what that actual idea looks like in body.
Yeah, in reality.
In reality was Jesus Christ.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we begin to kind of peel away the layers of metaphor that we discover in these other areas, like Avatar, The Last Airbender, or the movie Avatar, we find something similar. We find these conceptual relationships, these ideas that we can bring down into the body of our experience, that we can take ownership of if we wish, and kind of reclaim a part of ourselves through.
Yeah, and I think the best way to kind of locate what concepts you want to embody are the ones that are most exciting to you, the ones that you actually think to yourself, wow, that is, I wish that were true. And that's kind of one of the things we were talking about is with this particular day signature, we're dealing in that same thing we were talking about a couple days ago, which is, you know, oh, it's too good to be true. When you have that feeling, it's actually saying, it's so good, it must be true.
Yes.
And this is what the pathway of the avatar is communicating. It's saying that you get to bring down that concept from something that's within you that really lights you up and bring it forward to be seen.
Yes. This is what the angels might often refer to as a high idea, and the feeling that's connected to it, that swelling sense of like, oh, I wish. That's what they would refer to as a high feeling. Right? What is our quote at 5:10? At the amplified frequency of this day's signature, there is a long form phrase, and it could not more perfectly represent what we're describing here. It says this: follow your high feeling to the frequency of heaven that excites you. Life moves to express it when you do. Wow.
Yeah, that is today's amplified frequency at 5.
Wow.
Very perfect.
Yes. It couldn't be more perfect. And so, as an easy example, imagine you have this sense of, I wish I were beautiful. That very feeling, that very desire is actually an indication that you are already beautiful. Oh, I wish I were beautiful. That's because you are. Oh, I wish I were that good or that kind or that capable. That feeling is telling you that you are. The only impediment to the full expression of that is any idea that stands in opposition to it. It's the sense that that very thing is somehow held apart from you. That's the only distance between where you are now and what you're wishing for. And as we learn to close that distance through what we're describing here, through a willingness to embody that beauty, to trust and to choose and to claim and to live that, this is the only gap. It's really a gap of belief and behavior. And the moment you realize that you can adapt your beliefs to whatever is most glorious for you, your behavior follows suit very quickly. And that's what the wands are really inviting, is a willingness to act on what you've seen. You've heard us say this over and over again. And so we permit the desire, understanding that these things we are naturally drawn toward are mirrors of ourself and indicators of some part of ourself which yearns for expression in real life. We're not reading books or watching movies. We think we are. We think we're engaging with all of these various forms of entertainment, and all along the way, whether you're watching a bunch of squirrels on the bird feeder or watching Avatar: The Last Airbender, it doesn't matter. In all of these different directions, you are receiving messages, signals from life, every one of which is meant to activate or awaken some part of you.
Yes.
And if you have the eyes to see that, you move through this world of miraculous messengers, every one of which is pointing at some utterly brilliant part of you. this is something. This is a really special world to move through. The fact is, every one of us is moving through it, whether we're aware of it or not. Our awakening to it, our awareness of it, is the very thing that unlocks everything we may have previously wished for. Mm-hmm. That's what desire, connecting to this pathway of the avatar, is all about. It's about bringing it down into form, becoming the personification of beauty, of capacity, of kindness, of all of these things we wish to be. And this is how that path connects directly to the embodiment of the 29th angel. As we devote ourselves, as we commit our whole being to whatever that thing may be, and there will be many things like that for each of us, as we do this, as we bring that down into form and begin living from it, we become the embodiment of blessing itself. Mm-hmm. Of course, our lives are blessed by the lighthearted, elevated experience that we're permitting for ourselves. We will feel better Absolutely. And more beautiful. We'll feel larger.
We'll feel absolutely blessed.
Yes, and our presence becomes the blessing it was meant to be. This, of course, reminds us of Jesus as an avatar, a living blessing, right? Walking around, pouring unconditional love into everything and everyone, healing by virtue of the power of that love. Jesus was the personification of blessing. But you know what's interesting? Not everyone saw that or believed that at the time. Mm-hmm. Not even close. In fact, we know how that story played out. Mm-hmm. Jesus was the personification of blessing. He was the Messiah, but he was not the Messiah that the people wanted. What they were looking for at the time was a warrior. They were looking for a political warrior, someone who could take down the political regimes of their time. They were not interested in some peace-loving, talkative hippie. Mm-hmm. That's, it might as well have been that at the time. Yeah. So they were looking for something that did not come. The thing that did come was so far removed from what they wanted that they literally couldn't see it. But that didn't in any way detract Jesus from being Jesus. It did not detract from the quality of the blessing he was. It detracted from their ability to receive the benefit of that blessing, but that was on them. The lives he touched and continues to touch as a virtue of the example that he set, or by virtue of the example that he set, is the expression of this word avatar we're describing. And the reason I share that is because you will stand up and walk in the body of your avatar, so to speak, and it may or may not be recognized by those around you. It may or may not be appreciated overtly by those around you. Your family may or may not understand, may or may not applaud, right? You may feel in some cases that your very kindness is being crucified on the cross of other people's expectations. You may feel like you are a martyr. You are not. You are just choosing to be yourself, period. Mm-hmm. That's what we get to do. And when we do this, the mark of our impact on life is equal to that left by Jesus, because we stand up into the same presence in our own way. Mm-hmm. That's meant to happen. Mm-hmm. We have to choose to allow it, and we have to choose to let the expression of that become far more important than the expectations around us.
Yeah. I think that no matter what, the embodiment of activation is occurring. Mm-hmm. You're touching people's lives no matter what.
Yeah, whether they like it or not.
Right.
But that touch will always be a blessing, even if they don't understand it.
Correct. Wow.
Yeah, there's your connection.
Mm-hmm. I love
awesome.
That. Yeah.
Good teamwork really on that one. Mm-hmm. Okay, so there's a very obvious version of an avatar.
Yeah.
And clearly connects to all the dots of the day. We could probably stop there, but we're excited to have more fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's look at the movie Avatar. We'll just kind of work our way back. Mm-hmm. My own experience with that movie, I loved it from the start. The first time I ever saw it, I thought it was a brilliant movie for a lot of reasons. But what I personally loved most about it was the blue people. Mm-hmm. Something about the design of those characters their body proportions, their colors, the way that they moved, the way that they interacted with one another as a community, and the way that they recognized their community within the larger community of nature. All of this, it spoke to something so deep in me. It felt like I was encountering some like past version of myself. It felt personal in an odd way. It really, I kept thinking, man, I look like that. Like that's an artistic representation of how I feel at my best inside.
And that is the definition of avatar, because you're seeing an idea personified. You're seeing the fact that, you know, their blue bodies is very much represented. You know, we see the blue color correlates to the throat chakra. And you're all about expression and using your voice in various ways.
Wow.
And you can definitely see how this concept is being embodied in a way that's totally symbolic, but totally perfect.
It's representative of something personal.
Yeah. And then even the fact that they're like feline, you know, hybrids, the way that they move is elegant, but also really quick and strong. And it's just, it's a perfect, again, like you are that as well.
It's representative of what I choose to be.
Yes.
What's funny
what
is...
you desire to be.
What I desire to be, absolutely. My mom won't even watch that movie. She saw like pictures of those same people and was like, no, I don't want to watch that. That's not because there's something wrong with her. It's because it doesn't speak to her in the same way it speaks to me. And it may not speak to you in the same way that it spoke to me. The point is, those things we resonate with, those things that we get that sense of familiarity from, are speaking to us. They are messengers. That was a messenger for me. What's your experience with the movie?
Well, I mean, I feel the same way. I think that I definitely would look at the blue beings and see something like, wow, wouldn't that be so magical to be so strong and so just cat-like with your movements and absolute stunning like physiques. And then also, I mean, for me, it's like, wouldn't it be amazing to live in a tree and just to be able to move your bodies like constantly because you're having to climb this tree and be in nature. The fact that everything in their world like was like glowing with neon lights, especially at night, was so magical to me. I absolutely wanted to live in that world. So I love it. I love that so much. Okay,
so you're actually connecting new dots to this world of magic where everything is kind
magical,
of like
absolutely
lit up
with
magic. That's not so different from the one we're describing to you as like the foundation of our real life experience now. These are the things that connect to us on purpose. And if we allow them to mean something, and you know to allow it to mean something if it ignites that high feeling in you, so to speak.
Yeah, the
when
activation.
You follow that, you follow that desire, you begin to imagine yourself in that light. You begin to imagine that you're moving through a world where everything is lit by magic, where everything is animated by magic, where nothing is as it seems. Where it's like if someone would just turn the lights off on this particular moment, everything around you would start to glow like that. When you realize that life is filling everything around you in that way, it's not a leap to consider that your real life is just as magical. And it's not difficult to imagine yourself standing that tall. And it's not that difficult to imagine that degree of agility in your own spine. And it's not difficult to begin moving differently, walking differently, even communicating differently from this foundation of beauty and unavoidability and confidence that is inherent to a being of that,
stature.
Of that stature. So this is a part of what we get to do. We get to say, that's beautiful. Oh, wait, that means something. I want to try that on for size. And we begin to personify beauty.
And it is a choice. It's, It's absolutely a willingness and a choice to realize that our behaviors will make a difference. They will transform us.
Mm-hmm. That those things we're attracted to are meaningful, and that if we will do something with them through behavior in an active way, in a creative way, we will be changed as a result of that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There is some process that takes a caterpillar from being what it is to being a butterfly. That process, however it happens for the caterpillar, is exactly the same thing we're talking about here, in that we get to become something so completely different from what we thought we were simply by following these basic instructions. Follow your high feeling to the frequency of heaven that excites you.
Mm-hmm.
That's not a bad set of instructions to receive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We'll take that.
Yeah. And it is entirely felt. We can intellectually watch the movie Avatar and think, wow, that's really cool. But does it move you?
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel this, blossoming within you that feels like excitement, feels like desire, feels like a wish, which is actually a memory of you waiting to be reawakened. I remember when I first read the book Twilight, and it was probably 15 years ago now, but that was my first experience of this embodiment of activation. Something about this story, the main character in particular, the love story, of course, if you're familiar with the book Twilight, it's entirely like a love story that was written for teenagers, but it absolutely, something happened within me where I felt activated. I felt excited. I actually stayed up all night to read the first book and then go to the bookstore the next day to get the second book. That's how you're lit up by something. And you can't really explain it, but all these years later, I absolutely see this connection to my desire to have that kind of a powerful, intense love. Also, part of her story was very much starting out as this really meek and mild, shy girl who was quite frankly weak, but she discovers her own power, and by the end of the series, she's the most powerful being. She reclaims her inherent power. Yeah. It is very much that story very much spoke to me. Also, the fact that this entire series is completely magical. It's about vampires. So it's something that is not based in reality that you wish to be true because, of course, vampires are eternal. So, which I now have discovered, we are also eternal beings.
We all are.
And they have power. That is probably the number one magical trait that vampires had that I was just wow. Could you imagine being that strong? Could you imagine just being able to fly like the wind? And understanding that actually something that you thought wasn't accessible or was completely fantasy or magic, I have now come to realize that same thing happened to me, thinking that, this realm of us having no control or not being able to manifest our dreams, or thinking that our wishes and our desires are completely out of reach, so you just need to let them go. I have now come to this understanding that, of course, it's real. Of course, it's accessible. We just have to awaken to this idea and choose it. So that's my example of what that might look like. And I think the biggest sort of hurdle for me was to actually not minimize my initial reaction to that book as childish or, even shameful or embarrassing because it's Twilight. It absolutely was a huge turning point for me to connect to something that was very, very alive within me, that was wanting to be embodied.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very clearly. I think what was activated in a real way was your heart.
Yes.
And your poet's eyes.
Mm-hmm.
you told me something about the most significant realization that you pulled from that. Do you remember what it was?
Yeah. So the idea of magic.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That the main character, I mean, I haven't read the books. I've only seen the movies, thanks to you.
Mm-hmm.
That really, you said the whole first book is basically about this character not even awakening to her own power so much as awakening to a world of magic.
Mm-hmm.
Realizing that everything she considered to be normal was only normal within its closed context, and that beyond the boundaries of that tiny world was a much larger world with a lot more happening.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the same thing that we encounter as we allow our inherent desires to call us forward into that larger life, understanding that the initial desire is a memory of that larger life. It is a calling home.
Mm-hmm.
It is, desire is the siren song of home. I love that. It's about return.
Yes.
And that brings me to my little nerdy moment on Avatar: The Last Airbender. And so in this story, we have the Avatar who's been literally encased in ice for 100 years. Mm-hmm. He's this little kid. And for no apparent reason, he awakens in a world that is altogether different from the one that he was, put to sleep in, so to speak. And so he awakens in this moment of just confusion and terror, as tends to be the case when we awaken. It's a lot of energy all at once, and we don't know what it's about.
Confusion.
Yep. It feels confusing, and we're probably thinking that we're doing something wrong or that the world is breaking, when in fact the world is breaking open. Mm-hmm. The mobile wallpaper we shared today was breaking through, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's what this moment is about. And the whole story of the Avatar is, first of all, that he's needed in this world that he serves. His power is needed in order to essentially activate the powers inherent to all of these other different characters. And this Avatar needs to literally remember himself. Mm-hmm. Remembering himself being this regathering of the different members of himself. So remember the memory, but also remember. He's recalling all of these inherent skills, because the Avatar is capable of using any of the elements in any way he needs to. That's what makes him so unique. Mm-hmm. So you have this child who's kind of engaging this story whereby he is learning to reclaim these different skills. And I find it so interesting that he's not developing skills he doesn't have.
Right.
He's remembering something deep within him and permitting it to express. It's already there. Mm-hmm. There's no cultivation or development. There's only permission and rediscovery. Mm-hmm. That's a completely different movement. That's an inward movement and then an outward radiance.
Yeah.
We are not missing anything that we need to create by some effort. We are becoming aware of something which has only been buried under the ice for 100 years.
Yeah.
And when it comes in a big way. It explodes out of us and we become changed by it, and the world around us is changed by that change in us.
Yeah. It's the embodiment of activation.
The embodiment of activation. That's how it works. I also love that it's a child. Mm-hmm. So here's a child who awakens to this idea that the world needs him, and he's going, but I'm just a kid.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I can't do that. I'm not big enough to save the world. I don't know where you got that idea, but that's not for me. And yet circumstance after circumstance, opportunity after opportunity, relationship after relationship calls this character forward into a very large life where his impact is very much a benefit to the world. Mm-hmm. That's not so different from the story of Jesus. That's not so different from the story of us. Yeah. We are being called. And the impact of opening to that calling is extremely large. Learning to control our relationship to that, learning to understand what's really happening, and learning to permit it to happen even when we don't know exactly why or exactly where it's going to lead us or exactly how it might be of aid. All of that is ready to be released because it's time to permit it and to trust the rest. Life can take care of itself. First, it must be allowed to move. So that's what we see in this pathway of the avatar. It's about taking these great ideas into form, allowing the things that matter to you to matter so much to you that your life is altered beneficially as a result. That takes time, and it does take practice. The avatar in this story did have to train, but he was training to remember. He was not training to gain some skill he didn't already have. The same is true for us. That's what seer training is about. It's about learning to see in the way we were meant to see. It's about reclaiming what is natural and permitting that, rather than superimposing who we are and what we're meant to be doing with all these layers of expectation and smallness, ultimately limitation, that have nothing whatsoever to do with us. That's what this day is calling for. That's what the pathway of the avatar means. It requires a full commitment of yourself.
Absolutely. And that commitment, that devotion to yourself, requires you to really be very gentle about anything that has moved you before, no matter how simplistic or childish or any sort of feelings that you might have that would diminish that high feeling for you or diminish its importance, because it absolutely is trying to tell you something very significant about yourself that you are being invited to reclaim.
Yeah, that's exactly right. In whatever direction this moves for you, whatever it is that moves you, and however willing you are to allow it, the fact remains that every version of the avatar becomes a living blessing. That's what activates.
Yes.
There's no work to be done. You don't actually need to save the world. The world doesn't need you in the way that this particular story needed the avatar. That was a metaphor. The reality is that your world, your inner world, needs you to show up to it. You can only save yourself, and the permission of that self is the very thing that produces a light that beautifies the rest of the world. There's no one to save, but there are infinite opportunities for beautification, for the expansion of original perfection. That's what life is doing. That's what life wishes to do through each of us. And that's what we get to allow by opening. So you literally do become a living blessing, and your willingness to be that blesses you and others. There's your symbiotic loop. There's the return to your center and the radiance that is emitted as a result. How special. You know, we met the beacon, the lighthouse yesterday. A couple days before, we were working with the storm, the whirlwind. All of these different metaphors clearly connect, and they connect in our feet, not in our minds, but in the ground of our real life experience.
Right. I think that's the scariest part. I mean, we're not being called to be these literal warriors that have to save the world. What we're doing is facing our fears to be able to permit that embodiment. And of course that can definitely be scary sometimes when we're facing these ideas of guilt or shame or whatever it is that feels way too large to overcome or not allowed. Any of these fears are absolutely, if you feel that, it means you're really close to breaking through. You're really close to having that moment where you get on the other side of it and you realize, wow, I just did it. Like, you will feel like a hero. You will literally feel like you've just climbed a mountain because you've managed to break through that facade of fear and realize that all is well.
Yeah. I can't help but see that butterfly in the cocoon again. There's a period of time during which the butterfly, the developing butterfly, is totally cool in that cocoon. There's plenty of room, no problem.
Yeah.
And as it continues to grow, as each of us must, because life only grows, as it continues to grow, it starts to feel just a little more squeezed, a little less comfortable, until inevitably there's this point of like, I got to get out of here.
Yeah.
You know?
Yes.
And that moment just before the breakthrough is far and away the least comfortable. It feels the most squeezed.
Oh man, this is a great metaphor.
Isn't it true?
Exactly true.
So right on the cusp of your liberation, you meet the deepest terror, the largest sense of limitation. And it's right there, right at the threshold that you think, I'm not going to make it. And then, bam, there's this explosion. This is the 51. The 51st angel. This is the thunder over thunder. This is the shock as you realize, oof, chills, yummy. You realize that cocoon was helpful for a time, but is no part of you any longer. And you explode out of it into the world of a larger life that you didn't even know existed within that tiny world of the cocoon. Those fears, those small ideas, they may very well have served a very particular purpose up until now. They may have shown you so very clearly what has nothing to do with you that by the time you explode out of those barriers or limitations, there is no part of you that will ever have any interest in returning to them because you absolutely know better. Now you're flapping around. You'll never go back into the cocoon. There is a purpose for everything. And we have to realize that even in the most dire of circumstances, when we feel the least equipped to keep going, even especially in those moments, we are constantly arriving at the threshold of a larger life, and this will never stop. I don't mean to say that the discomfort will never stop growing and breaking and bursting. I mean to say that the growth will never stop. And the more of these ideas, these limiting ideas that we can carve away, that we can release consciously, the less of these kind of aching moments we arrive at, because we're now present to the process of growth and we are discerning enough to release what doesn't permit growth. And that changes everything.
Yeah. You realize at a certain point that at every time you have that happen, it's an opportunity. It's totally a blessing. You can meet it with celebration, with this sense of celebration, knowing that you're expanding.
Yep. Your awakening to it, your consciousness of it, massively accelerates the process of releasing. And so before long, there are no more cocoons, so to speak, to move through, because on each of these subjects, your self-identity, finances, your purpose, relationship, all these big avenues of inquiry that we tend to meet in our life, in every one of these, you have broken away all that is not empowering and permitted everything that's been so very ready to express. So it's like all these dams have been broken. The water just moves now. And so really what we're talking about here is not an indefinite process of discomfort and breakthrough. We're talking about a momentary engagement with a very specific part of a story, which is all about returning to something natural. The moment you have returned to that and all the dams have been broken down and that life is permitted to move, you're not going to have to deal with those dams again, because you're not going to be erecting them any longer, because now as a conscious adult, you're engaged in the flow of that story. Now it just, talk about blossom, talk about expansion. It explodes open. And that in the Avatar: The Last Airbender is his avatar, like, I call it his avatar bubble, because he starts to like float and there's this great
it's like an orb of
power and light.
Yeah.
And that's you. That's what you then become. You start floating around the world in your big orb of power and light, fully aware of what it is that you represent, which is life, which is beauty, which is love, which is everything delicious you could possibly imagine. I know that sounds abstract and poetic and idealistic. It is. And you get to live that. You really do. And we know this because we're learning to live it too. Not because we read about it, not because we have some special relationship to children's movies and children's books. but because we've been afforded the opportunity to awaken, to open our eyes to the way life moves beneath the surface of what we think we can see. And the moment you connect to that, everything you once saw is changed. Mm-hmm. It is a beautiful and magical world we move through. So walk the pathway of the avatar. Commit your whole self to everything you most love. The same message we give you every single day returns once again, because as you follow that high feeling, you're going to find that heaven that it's calling you toward, and you are going to embody it. And your existence in that heaven is the very thing that illuminates the way for everyone else to find theirs. Mm-hmm. It's really awesome, this energy we meet today.
Yeah.
Is there anything that we've forgotten? Anything you'd like to add?
No.
Okay. Then we very excitedly invite each of you to feel your way toward the frequency of heaven that excites you, based on the promise that life expresses that very heaven when you do. Become the living blessing that you are. You are not a burden, and your life is not a burden to you. You are a blessing, and your life is a blessing to you. Meet that today. Look for it, and you will find it. Mm-hmm. That's a guarantee. Okay. This was fun. Yeah. We'll look forward to seeing you again tomorrow with the Angel of Gravity.
Yes.
It's going to be a fun one.
Yeah, I'm excited. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, us too. Me too. Us, all of us. Okay. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you tomorrow.
Bye.
Bye.